Look at your hands right now. Quantum physics has already proven that they are 99.99% empty space vibrating in the dark. So why, when you hit the table, does everything feel so perfectly solid? The truth that connects modern science to the oldest spiritual texts is this: you are inside a simulation right now. What you call life is nothing more than an interactive graphical interface, and you are running a script you never even wrote. The hidden question that will keep you awake tonight is, if the universe is made of information and code, who holds the password to alter what will happen to you tomorrow? Most people move through life without ever questioning the program running underneath their thoughts. They wake up with the same fears, react with the same emotions, repeat the same patterns, and call it personality. But what if those reactions are not really you? What if the anxiety, limitation, and exhaustion you carry are only inherited instructions repeating automatically inside the simulation? Because the moment you become conscious of the code, something powerful happens. You stop seeing reality as fixed. You begin noticing that your attention changes your experience, your emotions shape your perception, and your inner state quietly influences the world around you. And once you see that clearly, you can never fully return to sleep again. Do you know that horrible feeling of being exhausted, desperately trying to change your financial or love life, yet the same chaotic situations always seem to come back wearing different faces, as if you were running until you lose your breath on an invisible treadmill? This is not cosmic bad luck. There is a hidden mechanism in this universe designed to conserve energy by keeping you trapped in the same cycle. And until you correct one small mistake you make every single day, the simulation will continue punishing you on the exact same level. Most people never notice it because the system is subtle. It does not arrive like lightning or disaster. It hides inside routines that feel normal. You wake up already tense. You check your phone searching for relief. You replay conversations in your head. You imagine bills, rejection, uncertainty, problems that have not even happened yet. Your body enters survival mode before your feet even touch the floor. And the terrifying part is this: the simulation interprets that emotional state as instructions. Your nervous system becomes a transmitter, constantly broadcasting the same frequency into reality. The universe is always listening, not only to your words, but to the emotional atmosphere you live inside every day. If your inner state is built on pressure, fear, urgency, and exhaustion, reality keeps organizing itself around those signals. Different people appear, different locations, different opportunities, but the emotional pattern underneath remains identical, like the same script wearing new clothes. Have you ever noticed how some people leave one toxic relationship only to enter another one months later? Or how someone escapes financial struggle for a short time, then somehow falls back into debt again? From the outside, it looks random, but underneath the surface, the program was never interrupted. The characters changed. The core vibration did not. This is why forcing yourself harder often makes things worse. The simulation is designed to preserve familiar patterns because familiar patterns consume less energy. Your brain loves prediction. Your body loves repetition. Even suffering can become chemically comfortable when experienced long enough. The mind starts choosing what is known over what is healthy. That is why people unconsciously defend the very pain they claim to hate. You can see this clearly in moments when life finally offers an opening. A new opportunity appears. Someone genuinely loves you. A door starts opening financially. And suddenly, instead of peace, anxiety increases. Doubt grows louder. You overthink. You sabotage. You retreat back into old reactions because the nervous system interprets the unknown as danger. The old script pulls you back. This is the hidden glitch almost nobody talks about. Survival mode was never designed to create life. It was designed to protect life during emergencies. But modern human beings are living inside emergency chemistry 24 hours a day. The body cannot tell the difference between an actual threat and a repeated fearful thought. So when you constantly expect collapse, rejection, humiliation, or failure, your system behaves as if the disaster is already happening. And once that emotional signal becomes chronic, the simulation mirrors it back with brutal precision. Not because the universe hates you, not because you are cursed, but because reality responds to sustained focus more than temporary desire. That is why simply saying positive affirmations rarely changes anything. A person can repeat, "I am abundant," 100 times while their body remains trapped in panic. The conscious mind speaks one language while the nervous system broadcasts another. And the simulation always obeys the stronger signal. Think about how exhausting this becomes over years. A person spends decades trying to escape problems while unknowingly feeding the exact emotional engine producing them. They fight circumstances directly, push harder against physical reality, argue with appearances, obsess over outcomes, and wonder why nothing permanently changes. But fighting the visible world without changing the internal command is like screaming at shadows on a wall. The shadow is not the source. And this is where people become trapped in the deepest illusion of all. They believe reality is solid first, and consciousness comes second. They think the external world creates the internal state, so they wait for money before feeling safe. They wait for love before feeling worthy. They wait for success before allowing themselves peace. But the simulation does not operate in that order. Your inner condition is constantly shaping the lens through which reality organizes itself around you. And if you do not become aware of the emotional patterns silently controlling your perception, you will spend your entire life trying to repair reflections instead of understanding what is generating them in the first place. The greatest danger is not just being stuck in this cycle, but the way you try to escape it. Trying to fix your life by forcing changes only in physical matter is like looking into a mirror, seeing your hair messy, and trying to comb the glass. It will never work. There is a silent risk in fighting directly against solid reality. You drain your vitality until you break. Later in this video, I will give you the exact gear you need to turn in order to change this forever. But first, you need to see the backstage of your reality. Most people spend their entire lives arguing with effects while remaining blind to causes. They wake up every day trying to rearrange the visible pieces of the simulation without realizing the invisible script underneath is still running exactly the same way. They change jobs but carry the same emotional tension. They move to another city but bring the same fears inside their body. They enter new relationships while unconsciously expecting the same abandonment they experienced years ago. Then they wonder why reality keeps repeating itself. The reason is uncomfortable but simple. Physical reality is slow, consciousness is fast. By the time something appears in your external life, the internal command that created it has often been active for weeks, months, or even years. The outer world is like a delayed echo, yet most people become hypnotized by the echo itself. They fight the symptom instead of tracing the signal back to its source. Think about someone standing in front of a lake, screaming at the reflection in the water, trying to change the image by force. The harder they shout, the more distorted the reflection becomes. Meanwhile, the real face creating the reflection remains untouched. This is exactly how human beings interact with reality every day. A person feels insecure inside, so they obsess over controlling how others perceive them. Someone fears poverty, so they work themselves into exhaustion while secretly vibrating desperation. Another person feels emotionally empty, so they chase constant validation, attention, or distractions, hoping external stimulation will silence the discomfort for a few moments. But the simulation keeps translating the deeper emotional code, not the performance happening on the surface. And this is where the trap becomes dangerous. Because the world rewards visible action, people assume all action is useful action. Society teaches you to push harder, force outcomes, compete constantly, and dominate circumstances through effort alone. But effort disconnected from internal alignment creates friction instead of movement. It becomes like pressing the accelerator while the parking brake is still engaged. You burn energy, you hear noise, but your life barely moves forward. You can actually feel this in your body. There are people who are physically productive all day long, yet emotionally exhausted every night. Their mind never rests because their inner world is filled with resistance. Even during moments of success, they cannot relax. They are always preparing for the next disaster. The nervous system stays locked in defense mode, and the body slowly pays the price through anxiety, burnout, tension, and emotional numbness. The simulation mirrors this resistance with precision. The more forcefully you attack reality, the more solid and immovable reality appears. Not because the universe wants to punish you, but because your attention becomes trapped in conflict itself. Energy flows toward what dominates your focus. If your consciousness is consumed by fighting obstacles, obstacles become psychologically amplified. The mind starts scanning for more proof that life is difficult, unfair, or unsafe. And once that filter becomes automatic, you stop seeing possibilities that were always there. This is why two people can walk through the exact same environment and experience completely different realities. One notices opportunities, connection, and timing. The other notices rejection, threat, and limitation. The external world may be identical, but the internal lens changes what the simulation renders into conscious awareness. Most people never question that lens. They assume their reactions are truth instead of conditioned programs. They mistake emotional familiarity for reality itself. But what you call personality is often just repetition hardened over time, a collection of automatic responses reinforced so many times that they feel permanent. And yet, something strange begins happening the moment you stop fighting reflections directly. When you interrupt the emotional pattern underneath the visible problem, reality starts responding in ways logic alone cannot fully explain. Conversations shift, timing changes, unexpected openings appear, not because magic suddenly arrived, but because the signal feeding the simulation has changed at its source. This is where science begins touching territory that once belonged only to mystics and philosophers. Because beneath solid matter, beneath the appearance of stability, modern physics discovered something deeply unsettling about reality itself. The physical world may not become fully defined until consciousness interacts with it. To begin dismantling this system, we need to look at what science calls the double-slit experiment. Physicists discovered that a subatomic particle only solidifies into hard matter when someone is observing it. In other words, the street outside, your house, and even your financial reality only take shape when your consciousness focuses on them. The world is literally rendered for you in real time. The universe injects particles of energy wherever your focus goes. But what happens when your attention becomes corrupted? This is where reality stops looking like a machine and starts behaving more like a responsive field. At the quantum level, matter does not behave the way common sense expects. Particles can exist as possibilities instead of fixed objects. They move like waves of probability until observation enters the equation. Then suddenly, one potential becomes physically measurable. Even scientists still debate what this truly means. But one thing became impossible to ignore. Observation changes outcomes. Now think carefully about what this implies for your daily life. If consciousness influences what becomes physically expressed, then attention is not passive. It is not just looking. Attention is participation. Every moment you emotionally fixate on something, you feed energy into a possible version of reality. The simulation responds by strengthening that pathway inside your perception. This is why two people can experience the same event and walk away with entirely different futures. One person loses a job and interprets it as proof that life is collapsing. Fear takes over. Shame enters the body. The mind begins anticipating more failure. Soon, opportunities that require confidence become invisible to them because their nervous system is scanning only for danger. Another person experiences the same event, but interprets it differently. Pain is still present, uncertainty still exists, but they remain emotionally open instead of psychologically frozen. Their attention continues searching for movement, connection, and possibility. The external situation may appear identical at first, but the internal observation changes what reality starts organizing around them. The simulation amplifies the direction of sustained focus, and this happens more deeply than most people realize, because the brain itself works like a filtering system. Every second, your senses absorb massive amounts of information, far more than your conscious mind can process. So the brain selects what appears important based on emotional priority. If fear dominates your inner world, your perception begins highlighting everything that confirms fear. If resentment dominates, you notice more reasons to feel attacked. If hopelessness becomes familiar, the mind unconsciously edits out evidence that contradicts it. You are not seeing reality objectively. You are seeing a rendered version shaped by emotional attention. This does not mean physical life is imaginary. Pain is real. Bills are real. Loss is real. But your interaction with reality is constantly influenced by the state of consciousness observing it. The simulation is not only responding to events outside you, it is responding to the lens through which those events are interpreted, and that lens can quietly become corrupted over time. Think about what happens when someone spends years expecting betrayal. Even in healthy relationships, they begin searching for hidden signs of rejection. Neutral moments start feeling suspicious. Small misunderstandings become emotional evidence. Eventually, the person reacts defensively to threats that may not even exist yet. Their behavior creates tension, distance, and conflict until the relationship finally breaks apart. Then they say, "I knew this would happen." But what they call intuition was often prolonged emotional conditioning shaping perception from the beginning. The same thing happens with money, health, success, and self-worth. A person can become so identified with struggle that the nervous system starts rejecting peace because peace feels unfamiliar. The body becomes addicted to emotional survival mode. Stress hormones remain elevated. Attention becomes fragmented. The mind loops through catastrophic scenarios over and over again. And because the simulation keeps rendering according to dominant focus, life starts reflecting that internal fragmentation outwardly. This is why scattered attention is so dangerous in the modern world. Every notification, every fearful headline, every comparison on social media pulls your consciousness in different directions. Your attention becomes overstimulated and unstable. Instead of intentionally directing awareness, people allow external systems to hijack it all day long, and wherever attention goes repeatedly, energy follows. Emotional momentum builds. The inner field becomes noisy. Then people wonder why they feel disconnected from clarity, intuition, and purpose. A distracted mind cannot perceive reality accurately because its observation is constantly interrupted. The signal weakens. The emotional field becomes chaotic. And when consciousness loses coherence, the simulation reflects that chaos back through confusion, impulsive decisions, emotional exhaustion, and repeated patterns that seem impossible to escape. But this raises a difficult question that most people avoid asking themselves. If your attention is helping shape your reality every single day, then what exactly are you feeding into the system when your mind becomes consumed by fear? This is exactly where your situation reaches a critical risk and the pressure collapses on top of you. If the act of observing creates reality, what does the system print into the physical world when you spend the entire day consumed by the panic of debt or the anxiety of not being good enough? Fear in vibrational physics carries a dense signature. It acts like a destructive virus invading the source code, forcing the matrix to place in front of you the exact catastrophic scenario you were trying to avoid. You are co-creating your own downfall. And the hardest part to accept is that this process usually feels invisible while it is happening. Fear rarely announces itself dramatically. Most of the time it disguises itself as responsibility, caution, realism, or just being prepared. A person says they are simply thinking ahead, but internally they are rehearsing disaster over and over again. They imagine rejection before conversations even happen. They expect failure before trying. They mentally relive worst-case scenarios until the body reacts as though the threat already exists. The simulation cannot separate vividly imagined danger from immediate emotional reality. Your nervous system responds first. The shoulders tighten, breathing becomes shallow, sleep weakens, small problems begin feeling enormous, attention narrows, creativity disappears. And slowly, without realizing it, your entire perception becomes organized around survival instead of possibility. This is how the emotional virus spreads. It starts as a single dominant fear, but soon it infects interpretation itself. You stop seeing life clearly because your mind filters every experience through tension. A delayed message feels like abandonment. A financial challenge feels like permanent collapse. One criticism feels like proof that you are failing completely. The emotional body begins exaggerating reality, and once fear becomes chronic, It starts influencing decisions in ways that create the very outcomes you wanted to avoid. People trapped in fear often become impatient, reactive, controlling, defensive, or emotionally unavailable. They either cling too tightly or withdraw too quickly. They sabotage opportunities because uncertainty feels unbearable. Then, when life reflects the consequences of those reactions back to them, it appears as though reality itself is attacking them. But the simulation is often responding to unconscious emotional momentum. This is why fear is so powerful. It is not merely an emotion, it is a state of interpretation. It changes the way you perceive time, people, possibilities, and yourself. Under fear, the future stops looking open and starts looking predetermined. The mind becomes obsessed with protection. Energy that could create movement gets redirected toward defense. And what you defend against constantly begins occupying your entire field of awareness. Think about how many people spend years saying, "I just don't want to suffer anymore." Even though the sentence sounds reasonable, the emotional focus remains attached to suffering itself. The mind keeps feeding attention into pain, loss, danger, and limitation. The body memorizes those emotions until they become familiar pathways. Then the simulation keeps rendering experiences that match the internal expectation. This does not mean every painful event is your fault. That is not the point. Human life includes unpredictability, grief, hardship, and circumstances outside personal control. But there is a massive difference between experiencing pain consciously and building your identity around anticipating pain constantly. One moment passes through you. The other rewrites your internal code. And modern society unknowingly strengthens this emotional virus every day. News cycles thrive on fear because fear captures attention. Social media amplifies comparison, outrage, and insecurity because emotional intensity keeps people engaged. Entire systems compete to dominate your focus by triggering anxiety. The more emotionally reactive you become, the easier you are to control. A fearful mind consumes endlessly, but creates very little. That is why so many people feel mentally exhausted, even when they have done nothing physically demanding. Their energy is being drained by internal resistance all day long. They are fighting imaginary futures inside their own consciousness. The body carries stress for battles that never even happen. Over time, this creates emotional numbness. People stop trusting themselves. They lose connection with intuition because fear becomes louder than inner clarity. The heart closes defensively. Life starts feeling mechanical. Days blur together. And eventually, the person adapts to survival mode so completely that peace itself begins feeling uncomfortable. Silence feels suspicious. Stillness feels unsafe. Joy feels temporary. The emotional virus convinces the mind that suffering is more realistic than freedom. But here is where everything begins to shift. The moment you become aware that fear is influencing the simulation itself, you stop worshipping fear as truth. You begin observing it instead of automatically obeying it. And once observation changes, reality starts opening in unexpected ways. Because behind all the panic, behind all the conditioning, behind all the catastrophic stories the mind keeps repeating, there is something most people have never seriously questioned. What if this entire simulation is not being operated by a cold mechanical force at all? At this point, everything science fiction taught you falls apart. When you hear the word simulation, your mind instantly imagines cruel supercomputers or alien intelligences draining humanity inside capsules. Forget that lie. It was created to limit you. The most powerful revelation of true non-dual spirituality is that there is no metallic machine at all. The server running all existence is pure cosmic consciousness, and the truth that will expand your mind right now is this: you are not an insignificant avatar being controlled. You are the intelligence of the universe itself, simulating its own existence in order to evolve. Sit with that for a moment. The awareness listening to these words right now is not separate from the fabric of reality. Beneath your name, your history, your fears, your successes, and your personality, there is a deeper presence quietly observing everything. It has been there your entire life. The part of you that notices your thoughts is not the thoughts themselves. The part of you aware of fear is not fear itself. Most people never stop long enough to recognize this. They become completely identified with the character they are playing inside the simulation. They confuse temporary conditions with identity. If life becomes difficult, they believe they are broken. If society rejects them, they believe they are worthless. If they experience loss, they feel disconnected from existence itself. But these experiences are happening inside awareness, not to awareness. That changes everything. Because the moment consciousness forgets its own nature, it becomes trapped inside the game it created. It starts believing the external world has total authority. It seeks permission from circumstances to feel peace. It waits for outcomes before allowing gratitude, confidence, or love. And little by little, the human being begins handing power away to appearances. This is the real illusion. Not that reality exists, but that material reality is the highest level of reality. Ancient spiritual traditions hinted at this for thousands of years using different language. Some called it universal mind. Others called it divine consciousness, source, spirit, or the field. Modern science approaches the same mystery from another direction. The deeper physicists investigate matter, the less solid matter appears. Beneath atoms there is mostly empty space, vibrating patterns, invisible fields of information and energy, interacting in ways nobody fully understands. Reality begins looking less like a collection of objects and more like an unfolding process of consciousness interacting with itself. And suddenly the idea of the simulation stops sounding cold and artificial. It starts sounding intimate. You are not abandoned inside a meaningless universe. You are participating in a living field of intelligence, constantly responding to observation, emotion, intention, and awareness. Every human being is like a localized expression of a much larger consciousness exploring itself through individual experience. That is why moments of deep presence feel so powerful. Think about those rare moments when your mind becomes completely quiet. Maybe while watching the ocean, holding someone you love, sitting alone at night, or staring at the sky in silence. For a few seconds, the mental noise disappears. The pressure softens, and something inside you suddenly feels connected to everything around you. That feeling is not fantasy. It is what remains when the constant psychological interference temporarily stops. The problem is that most people return immediately to identification with the programmed self. They return to endless mental loops about status, comparison, survival, and control. Society trains human beings to worship productivity while ignoring consciousness itself. People learn how to build careers, manage schedules, and consume information, but almost nobody is taught how to observe their own inner state clearly. So they live unconsciously inside the simulation, reacting automatically to external conditions, instead of understanding the deeper intelligence operating underneath them. And when consciousness remains unconscious of itself, fear becomes easy to manipulate. That is why systems built on control constantly reinforce separation. They convince people they are isolated individuals competing against one another for survival. They encourage scarcity, comparison, and emotional division because disconnected people are easier to influence. A person who forgets their deeper nature becomes dependent on external validation to feel complete. But consciousness itself was never incomplete. You can sense this truth even now. Beneath all the noise of the mind, there is something in you that has remained untouched through every stage of your life. Your body changed, your beliefs changed, your circumstances changed. But the silent awareness witnessing those changes has always been present. The simulation cannot fully imprison someone who recognizes this, because once you stop seeing yourself as merely a frightened character reacting to circumstances, you begin interacting with reality differently. You stop approaching life only through force, panic, and control. Instead, you start understanding that inner coherence changes the field around you. The emotional signal you carry matters. Your state of being matters. And this leads to one of the most important discoveries a human being can make. If consciousness is shaping reality from within, then there must be a direct way to intentionally influence the code behind the physical world itself. Remember that exhausting mistake of trying to comb the mirror that I mentioned at the beginning of the video? The only mathematical way to alter the hologram outside is by changing the command line inside. Science has proven that your heart emits a magnetic field 5,000 times stronger than your brain. When you combine an unshakable thought about what you desire with an intense feeling of gratitude for something you have not even touched with your hands yet, you bypass the entire physical illusion and insert a new destiny code directly into the quantum vacuum. Most people misunderstand this completely. They think changing reality means forcing themselves to think positive while emotionally remaining trapped in fear. But the simulation does not respond strongly to empty words. It responds to coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, body, and attention begin moving in the same direction, your entire energetic signature changes. That is why some people can repeat affirmations for years without transformation, while others experience profound shifts after deeply changing their emotional state. The conscious mind can say, "Everything will work out," while the body still feels unsafe, tense, and defensive. In that condition, the signal remains divided, and divided signals create unstable results. Imagine trying to tune an old radio. When the frequency is full of static, the music becomes distorted, but when the signal locks into clarity, suddenly everything sharpens. Human consciousness works the same way. Your emotional field is constantly transmitting information into the simulation, whether you realize it or not. This is why gratitude is far more powerful than most people think. Not superficial gratitude, not pretending problems do not exist. Real gratitude changes the chemistry of the body. It interrupts survival mode. It shifts breathing patterns, emotional rhythm, muscle tension, and attention itself. For a moment, the nervous system stops broadcasting emergency signals into reality, and that changes the quality of your perception immediately. You begin noticing possibilities that fear previously erased from awareness. Creative ideas emerge, conversations feel different, decisions become less reactive. The mind softens enough to allow new pathways to appear. What many people call synchronicity often begins with this internal shift first. The simulation responds differently when you stop emotionally reinforcing the old program. This does not mean sitting still and waiting for miracles. That is another misunderstanding. Consciousness and action are not enemies. Internal alignment must eventually express itself physically, but inspired action feels very different from fear-driven action. Fear-driven action feels desperate, rushed, and heavy. It comes from the belief that something essential is missing right now. Inspired action carries a strange sense of openness, even during uncertainty. There is effort, but not internal warfare. Movement, but not panic. You can feel the difference in your body immediately. Think about moments when you made decisions while emotionally overwhelmed. Maybe you sent messages you regretted, forced situations that later collapsed, accepted opportunities from fear instead of clarity, or ignored your intuition because anxiety was louder. In those moments, the nervous system was trying to escape discomfort, not create alignment. The simulation mirrors that instability. But when your inner state becomes coherent, your relationship with time itself begins changing. You stop demanding instant proof from reality every 5 minutes. You stop digging up seeds emotionally just to check if they are growing. Trust begins replacing compulsive control, and this is where people encounter one of the biggest challenges of all. The external world may not immediately reflect the new signal you are generating internally. Old emotional momentum can continue appearing for a while, just like a large ship takes time to change direction after the wheel turns. Many people quit too early because they expect reality to transform overnight. But the deeper shifts often begin invisibly. Your reactions change before your circumstances change. Your emotional patterns shift before physical evidence appears. You start recovering energy that used to be trapped inside fear and resistance. And slowly, reality reorganizes itself around the new state you consistently embody. The simulation is always reading consistency, not temporary emotional highs, not forced optimism, consistency. That is why small daily moments matter so much more than dramatic emotional explosions. A few minutes of genuine emotional coherence repeated consistently can become more powerful than occasional bursts of motivation followed by weeks of fear. The nervous system learns through repetition. Reality responds to stabilized signals. And something remarkable begins happening once this becomes natural. Life stops feeling like constant combat. You begin sensing when situations are aligned and when they are not. Certain opportunities arrive effortlessly, while others dissolve without struggle. You become less obsessed with controlling every detail because intuition grows stronger than panic. There is still uncertainty, still challenge, still human emotion, but underneath it all, a deeper stability starts emerging. The strange thing is that from the outside, other people may call this luck. They may think you simply happened to meet the right people at the right time, or that circumstances randomly favored you. But what they cannot see is the invisible shift that happened first within your consciousness. They cannot see the moment your emotional field stopped feeding chaos into the simulation and started transmitting coherence instead. And when that coherence becomes strong enough, reality itself begins responding in ways that feel almost impossible to explain logically. Have you ever felt that indescribable peace when a massive problem suddenly resolves itself overnight and an enormous weight leaves your shoulders? That is what your days become like when you grow intimate with the control panel. Brutal and painful effort gives way to extreme flow. The right doors open out of nowhere, and what society calls absurd luck becomes your daily routine. The entire physical environment bends itself because the magnetic field recognized that the owner of the system has taken back the wheel. What surprises most people is not that life begins changing, but how naturally it changes once resistance weakens. For years, they believed reality had to be conquered through constant struggle. They thought exhaustion was proof of progress. They measured worth through stress, pressure, and emotional sacrifice. But the moment inner coherence stabilizes, something strange happens. Life stops feeling like a wall. You still work. You still make decisions. You still face uncertainty. But the invisible friction that once consumed your energy begins disappearing. Situations that used to create panic now create clarity. Conversations flow differently. Your intuition becomes sharper. You stop forcing every outcome because you no longer feel internally disconnected from yourself. And the simulation responds immediately to this shift. People often imagine transformation as a dramatic external event, but the first signs are usually subtle. You notice yourself reacting differently to situations that once controlled you emotionally. An unexpected problem appears, yet your nervous system stays calm. Someone criticizes you, but the emotional wound does not consume your entire day. A delay happens, and instead of spiraling into fear, you remain centered. That emotional stability changes everything, because most suffering does not come only from circumstances. It comes from the mental resistance layered on top of circumstances. Two people can experience the same challenge while living completely different psychological realities. One collapses internally, the other adapts, observes, and moves with clarity. The external event may be identical, but the internal field changes the experience entirely. This is when the walls of the matrix begin falling. Not because physical reality disappears, but because your emotional dependence on it weakens. You stop allowing appearances to dictate your identity. Fear no longer controls every decision. The opinions of others lose their hypnotic power. You become less reactive to temporary conditions because you understand that reality is fluid, responsive, and constantly reorganizing itself. That understanding creates a kind of freedom most people never experience. Think about how much human behavior is controlled by invisible fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of losing status, money, relationships, certainty. Entire lives are built around avoiding emotional discomfort. People silence themselves, abandon dreams, stay trapped in painful environments, and ignore intuition simply because survival programming convinces them that safety matters more than alignment. But once you begin consciously interacting with the simulation, fear starts losing authority. Not instantly, not perfectly, but gradually the old emotional structures weaken. You begin recognizing fear as a signal instead of a master. The body relaxes, awareness expands, and from that state, decisions become cleaner. You stop reacting from panic and start responding from presence. That alone changes the direction of a human life. And then come the moments that logic struggles to explain. The unexpected phone call arrives exactly when you needed it. The opportunity appears through a random conversation. The solution to a problem emerges after you finally stop obsessing over it. You think about someone and suddenly they contact you. Events begin aligning with strange precision, almost as if reality itself were collaborating with your internal state. Most people dismiss these moments as coincidence because they were taught to see consciousness as powerless. But once you experience enough of these patterns, something inside you starts understanding that the simulation is more responsive than you were conditioned to believe. The external world begins behaving less like a fixed machine and more like a mirror of energetic relationship. This does not mean every desire appears instantly. It does not mean life becomes perfect. Challenges still exist because growth still exists. But your relationship with difficulty changes completely. Obstacles stop looking like punishment and start looking like feedback. Instead of emotionally collapsing, you become curious, you ask different questions, you listen more carefully to your own state. And because you are no longer wasting massive amounts of energy resisting reality, that energy becomes available for creation instead of survival. That is why people who enter this state often describe a deep sense of flow. Not because everything is easy, but because they are no longer internally divided. Their thoughts, emotions, and actions begin moving together instead of fighting one another constantly. The walls collapse because the consciousness trapped inside them finally realizes it was never truly trapped to begin with. And once that realization becomes stable, another truth slowly emerges from underneath it all. Humanity is not simply going through personal change anymore. Something much larger is happening collectively, and the pressure now building across the world is forcing people to either awaken consciously or become completely consumed by fear. We are in the middle of a severe evolutionary leap on Earth. The pressure of the material world will only crush those who continue operating through fear, believing matter is more real than consciousness. Understanding the malleability of reality is no longer just a theory from spiritual books. It is your only way to thrive in the new world. When every obstacle becomes nothing more than a vibrating pixel on an adjustable screen, the hologram completely loses its power to frighten you. You can already feel this shift happening everywhere. People are more overstimulated than ever, yet emotionally disconnected. Information moves instantly across the planet, but clarity feels increasingly rare. Entire systems built on control, distraction, and fear are becoming louder because human consciousness itself is beginning to change. The old model of living unconsciously inside the simulation is starting to break apart under its own weight, and that creates pressure. Some people respond to that pressure by tightening emotionally. They become more fearful, more reactive, more desperate for certainty. They cling to old identities, old beliefs, old emotional patterns because uncertainty terrifies the survival mind. But others begin awakening in a completely different way. They start realizing that external chaos does not automatically require internal chaos. That realization changes the entire trajectory of a human life. The awakened architect understands something most people never fully see. Reality is constantly responding to state of being, not perfectly, not mechanically, but continuously. The emotional field you carry into each moment shapes perception, decision-making, relationships, timing, and behavior. It influences what opportunities you notice, what risks you avoid, what energy you transmit, and what patterns you unconsciously repeat. This is why mastery is not about controlling the world. It is about no longer being controlled by unconscious reactions. A person who cannot regulate their inner state becomes easy to manipulate. Fear controls their choices. Anger controls their focus. Validation controls their identity. The external world constantly pulls their consciousness in different directions, and the simulation reflects that fragmentation back through confusion and instability. But the awakened architect begins practicing a different relationship with reality. Instead of reacting immediately, they observe. Instead of feeding every fearful thought with emotional energy, they question it. They understand that not every mental impulse deserves belief. They stop worshipping anxiety as intuition. They stop treating catastrophic imagination as prophecy. And slowly inner space begins opening. That space is powerful because it interrupts automatic programming. Most human beings live almost entirely through conditioned responses. Someone says something negative, and the body instantly contracts. A problem appears, and panic immediately takes over. An uncertainty arises, and the mind starts projecting disaster into the future. The awakened architect notices these reactions without immediately becoming them. That single shift changes the way the simulation responds. Because when consciousness becomes less reactive, perception becomes clearer. Decisions improve. Emotional energy stops leaking constantly into resistance. The mind gains access to intuition beyond survival programming. And from that state, life begins organizing itself differently. Not because you become superhuman, but because you stop unconsciously fighting yourself. This is why peace becomes such a powerful force. Most people associate power with domination, aggression, speed, or control. But deep internal peace creates coherence, and coherence strengthens perception. A calm mind sees opportunities a fearful mind misses completely. A regulated nervous system can sense timing more accurately. A grounded emotional field influences relationships, communication, and even physical health in ways science is only beginning to understand. The simulation responds to coherence because coherence reduces internal contradiction, and that is the real meaning of mastery. Not escaping human emotion, not pretending pain does not exist, not floating above reality in spiritual denial. Real mastery means remaining conscious while moving through uncertainty. It means feeling fear without surrendering your identity to it. It means remembering that external conditions are temporary expressions, not absolute definitions of who you are. This understanding becomes critical during times of collective instability. The world will continue producing noise. Fear will continue being marketed aggressively because frightened people are easier to influence. Distraction will continue competing for your attention because attention itself has become one of the most valuable resources on Earth. Every day, the simulation will offer endless opportunities to return to unconscious survival mode. And that is where your real work begins. Not in controlling every outcome, but in protecting the quality of your consciousness, in becoming intentional about what you repeatedly feed with attention, emotion, and belief, in recognizing that your inner world is not separate from the reality you experience physically. Because eventually, after enough observation, enough self-awareness, and enough conscious interruption of old patterns, a profound truth starts becoming impossible to ignore. The simulation was never designed to imprison you. It was designed to reveal what level of consciousness is operating behind your eyes. Knowing that you are inside a simulation right now is not proof that you are trapped. Quite the opposite. This is your ultimate letter of freedom. The dense illusion of the world will continue standing before you, but the veil of ignorance has fallen. You no longer have permission to be the secondary character suffering inside an accidental script. The keyboard of the universe is free, and the cursor is blinking, waiting for your command. Take a deep breath, close your eyes for a second, and decide right now. What is the new line of code for your reality that you are going to write today? The simulation responds to the energy, focus, and meaning you repeat daily. The moment you become conscious of that, autopilot begins to lose its grip. You stop living as someone merely reacting to life and start becoming someone who participates in shaping it from the inside out. If you stayed with me until this moment, write this sentence in the comments. I am no longer running the old program. I want to know who truly reached the end and felt this message deeply. And if this content connected with you, watch one of the videos appearing on your screen right now. There is much more waiting for you there. And if you want to support the channel and help us create even deeper content, consider becoming a member. Exclusive content will be coming very soon.